It's quite fascinating, his journey from the time he flee 51 and arriving finally here after several years. We have a house which actually been built by my great-great-grandfather and conceived and created by himself. It's quite wonderful. Yeah. Victor Hugo and my father, they both had an extraordinary connection to nature. One was the poet of nature, and my father was the painter of nature. I think it would be a place where I can imagine that artists will find the material they need, and the inspiration, definitely. Yeah.
And I remember reading Toilers of the Sea. It was the first book I'd ever read of Victor Hugo, and it was kind of like, it completely changed my relationship with this landscape and this island. And then as an artist, that works into every part of your creative process, really. We're limited here with spaces that people can express themselves, and the art is front and center. You need, an audience that are there to experience the art front and center is really important. And I think that the Victor Hugo Centre could be a wonderful place to kind of focus that.
I think there are a lot of people who look back and they say, oh, well, he wrote these wonderful novels and they turned them into these kind of okay musicals and that kind of thing. But there was so much more. He's totally against slavery. He's all about free education, but he's also about ending the death penalty, which is way ahead of its time.
I think it's very important not to separate the literature and the politics. They all go together. And I think that the hub will allow people from all over the world to concentrate on this particular place in Hugo's life where he lived during his exile, and to think about what it is to continue talking even when you were supposed not to. That's what happened with Victor Hugo. When he was exiled, he was supposed not to have any influence in France anymore. And that's because he was exiled that he wrote his masterpieces.
The plots are so dramatic and so compelling. The moral questions that it raises, so fascinating and intriguing and thought-provoking. And the kind of spiritual enrichment, the feeling that they get from experiencing the stories that he tells them, makes it an absolutely life-changing experience for them.
I think one of the challenges as an educator is sometimes when you're learning over and over again in the same classroom with the same teachers, it can be hard to break through and get that curiosity and excitement. And I think having a learning centre like the one that we're thinking about developing for the Victor Hugo Centre will not only create a space that's exciting where they're able to step outside of a school environment and actually think about things maybe from a different perspective, but also potentially give opportunities for children across the island to come together and to explore ideas like equality, like the ideas of how we alleviate poverty, how we face some of the challenges facing us, and how we use our voice and our writing to inspire change in our world of Guernsey.
I think the centre, it's important that we don't just envisage it in instrumental terms, but my hope is that it's also going to be a hub for the creativity and the imagination that was so central to everything that Hugo did. All of his social campaigning was dependent on his poetic vision of what it meant to be and what it meant to be human. So I think the centre itself will become precisely a vehicle for this kind of intrinsic pleasure and exploration and curiosity that was so vital and that drove so much of his work.
He described Guernsey as the gem of the sea, and I think if you look at the view behind us, I can understand why he would say that. He also famously said that he managed to achieve more in a month living in Guernsey than a year living in France. So he clearly found Guernsey a place of inspiration and a place where he could stop and think and write, obviously, some incredible works of literature. So the Guernsey Literature Festival fully supports the work of the Victor Hugo Centre in delivering what promises to be a really inspirational and educational centre for Guernsey. It will be brilliant just to be able to host literary festival events in the venue.
I think one of the great things about having a centre, as opposed to his house, is that you can expand and open up those parts of his mind and his life in ways that the house can't. I mean, the house is this phenomenal manifestation of the inside of his mind, but in a artistic way. What we need to do is be able to let people understand that this is a multifaceted man with futuristic ideas that could be really said to be revolutionary today.
It's often acknowledged by many biographers as the period in which his voice took on an ever more obvious global resonance. So Guernsey historically has that place in Hugo's own story. And I think today in the 21st century, Guernsey can once again link itself to that very rich cultural heritage through Hugo to make itself a platform for exactly the kind of discussions around equality and around a more sustainable society that we so desperately need here in the 21st century.